Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get going before any more news hits the headlines.
Yeah.
So a lot to talk about for this week. We'll wrap up Candace and preview the Bristol Night Race in just a bit, but let's get through some of the news stories, especially, of course, more than this is a NASCAR show, so let's talk NASCAR with Kyle Busch. So the Kyle Busch silly season is finally over.
Finally. Yep. It's what we thought. Like I mentioned, Chevrolet was in the mix and Toyota wasn't the favorite anymore. And that's exactly what happened. And Kyle Busch will be with RCR next year. Reddick, as of now, will be in a third car. I just wonder how much posturing RCR and 2311 are now doing, because when I wrote about this yesterday, RCR, to put Reddick in the third car, you got to think they don't have a third car now. So you got to hire pit crew chief, engineer, hauler, everything that goes into a third team.
Sure.
Oh, and a charter. Those things aren't cheap. Now they're talking those things are running between $15 and $20 million to secure a charter. So you're looking between all of that around a $20 million investment for a driver that's only there for 1 year. Seems steep to me when you can just negotiate a buyout, which to me would seem a little bit cheaper. But I get what they're doing is they're saying, well, we have an option and he has an option. We agreed the contract to put it together and we'll keep him. So 2311, if you want him early, you're going to have to pay for him, which why would RCR not say this, what they're saying, to get 2311 to buy him out? So instead of spending $20 million,
Sure,
you may get a couple million coming to you.
Yeah.
But 2311 has been like, we don't want to do that because we only have 2 charters. We don't want to go out and buy a third charter because we don't know what Kurt Busch is going to do. If Kurt Busch doesn't come back, then yes, we may have to buy him out because there's our guy, but we don't need a third charter for next year. If Kurt Busch comes back, then we're set because odds are probably Kurt Busch is going to retire at the end of next season, even if he comes back.
Yeah.
I can't see him signing a new deal.
No.
Well, they already have their 2024 driver. So in 2311's case, like, why would we spend money when this all could work out? So that's kind of the next wrinkle of things. We do know Kyle Busch is going to RCR. He'll be in the 8 car. He'll basically have Tyler Reddick's team. If Tyler Reddick stays, he's going to have what I feel like is a skeleton crew. I don't know how competitive this car will be if they do run it, they're just going to have to throw it together. And then your question is, if you throw it together, is this for long term? Do you bring somebody else in 2024? So to me, there's more questions now than there were before this.
How realistic is it that Reddick is still with RCR next year?
I'd say it's 50-50 only because you don't know what Kurt Busch is going to do.
Kurt Busch can really make everything easy by just retiring.
Yeah, that would force 2311 to have to buy him out. And I think RCR would be willing, like, look, guys, let's just talk. Let's not spend millions to put a team together. Then when we've already said, because there's asked, why did you put Kyle Busch in the 8 car? Well, because we're looking for the future, they said. He's here for the future. Tyler's not. Tyler's here for 1 year. So if that's the case, why spend multi-millions for 1 year?
Yeah.
Then you got to think, are you setting up for the future? Because let's be honest, since they became a 2-car team, RCR's turned things around. Yeah. They're looking more and more relevant.
Yeah, no reason to go back to 3. Yeah.
No, not so. To me, it makes more sense to negotiate a buyout
with
2311. But the only kicker is, what if 2311 doesn't need him? Then Tyler Reddick, is he on the sidelines next year? That's where the things get tricky. But for right now, I feel like both sides are going to say 2311, we're not buying him out. We've got Kurt Busch as our driver. RCR, we've got a deal in place. We're keeping him. Right now, there's no clarity.
And Kyle's, has he ever driven a Chevy?
Yeah, he started off with Chevy.
How long ago was that?
I think it was 05 to 07.
Wow. Okay.
He's won 4 races with Chevy. 56 of his 60 wins have come with Toyota. He was the first Toyota driver to win a race. He was the first Toyota driver to win a championship. And that's what Kyle Busch was saying is you can tell he kind of felt a little hurt. Toyota didn't make things right just because, again, I mean, you got to look at, and I wrote about this yesterday too, as we always look at stick and ball sports, we compare draft classes together, or Russell Wilson and Seahawks are now going to be compared against each other. Like, what Russell can do with Denver and these guys that Seattle accumulated. You think in the long term. Well, it's kind of in this case is it's essentially Kyle going to Chevy and Reddick going to Toyota. And you got to look at on paper, it's like, well, one team is getting a 60 race winner. Him and Harvick are the most active wins for active drivers in 2 championships. Kyle has as many championships as Tyler Reddick has wins.
Sure.
But Tyler is going to a team that seems to be on the rise with 2311. But again, he's got 2 wins. What if Kyle goes to the RCR and RCR this is what they need to kickstart? So it's an interesting debate on which team is going to win this trade in the long run. Because Gibbs also gets Ty Gibbs. You've also got that thing that's more than likely going to happen.
But doesn't it all depend on how long Kyle Busch wants to drive?
It does, because the runway, as I hear Hamlin, like he said, is longer with Reddick than it would be with Kyle.
Of course.
Because Kyle's 37.
Yeah.
Reddick's also at 26. But Kyle's mentioned, I want to race another decade.
All
he
right.
wants to race.
To me, then you win with Kyle. I mean, if Kyle races another decade for you, you definitely win that bet. You do.
You do. I mean, Kevin Harvick's 46, and he's winning races.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So,
and it's just it's the PR of having Kyle Busch on your team. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And plus, like Toyota's mentioned back in Daytona, this last Daytona race, we don't want to race against the pissed off Kyle Busch. He's going to be mad. Well, yeah, you're going to put that guy in. I mean, if Tyler Reddick could win in that car, don't you think Kyle Busch can?
And shouldn't this – now, we talked about Martin Truex Jr. when he finally gets rid of his big decision. He should be more focused, and we're going to feel the same way with Kyle. But Kyle is still with Toyota.
That's where that gets interesting.
So does he really have any more motivation to win this year?
I feel like he does. Kyle wants to just go out on top. I don't think Kyle
he's
cares.
not going to not want to win. Yeah, but I don't know if it's going to be 100%. I don't think he's all bought in with Toyota.
And because let's be honest, he still has to figure out his truck series stuff. Yes, they're going to be Chevrolet. We know that. That's taken care of. But that still wasn't fully unveiled, like, who's going to drive the trucks? Well, because let's be honest, with Toyota, it's Toyota brings the sponsorship. Toyota has the development drivers. Hey, you have the team, you have the trucks, we'll bring the sponsor and the driver. You don't have to worry about that. Well, now he kind of does. Where's the sponsorship going to come from? Who are the drivers going to be? So he still has some things to figure out with the truck team, with Chevrolet. And plus, let's be honest, it's what I questioned on the IndyCar side, which happened this morning for Palou and Rosenquist thing. When Palou was cut off access, why are you going to give access to a driver that's leading?
Yeah.
What does Toyota do with Kyle now? He's leaving. You know he's leaving. You're not going to give him all the data. So how much is that going to affect him at these races?
Yeah.
Bristol this weekend may not make much of a difference. Next round with the Roval and Super Speedway.
Yeah, but Kyle's right now. Kyle's still not in the playoffs. Kyle's on the outside.
Yep, and if it's a question to look at next week. If let's say Kyle doesn't get through, let's say he's eliminated. Don't you think he's just a top 20 driver the rest of the way?
Absolutely.
They're not going to. I think they just go through the motions.
Yes.
I think that takes a driver.
It all depends what happens on Saturday night.
And at that point, I'd almost with Kyle, and he's got the money. Do you negotiate not a buyout because you know he's leaving? It's like, hey, can I just?
Yeah, who wants my car? Yeah.
Can I just get out of this seat for the last 7 races?
Could happen, and they might be. Hey, we don't want to give him any more information, so go ahead.
Yeah, let me focus here. Yeah, let me focus my long term. Because the thing with Toyota, where Kyle's got sleepless nights, now Toyota. Think about this: they lost their development team. What are they going to do with these young drivers that they put through ARCA, the Kyle Busch, the Gibbs, the Cup? They don't have that anymore. Brandon Jones, who brings in a lot of money, well, he's going to Junior Motorsports next year, another Chevy team. They lost him this morning. It frees open a seat in the Xfinity Series. But what do? Now they just lost a financial backing. They lost Kyle Busch Motorsports. Toyota's got a lot of things. Martin Truex, I would venture to say next year is probably it for him. He mulled on this decision so on this year. I think 2023 is his swan song. Well, what do you do now? Now you lost Kyle Busch. You're probably going to lose Truex next year. On 2311 Toyota side, you probably lose Kurt Busch next year. You got Denny Hamlin, who's 41, will be 42. What do you do now? So there's a lot of situations where Toyota now is what is their future?
Well, what is it?
Who's there?
Because right now it's Gibbs. Gibbs is Hamlin, Bell, Reddick. No, Hamlin, Bell, and who else?
Hamlin, Bell. So on the Cup side, you got Hamlin, Bell, Kyle Truex.
Yeah.
And then
so next year,
also
Hamlin, Bell,
Gibbs,
Truex.
Truex.
Oh, one more year,
Gibbs isn't
Truex.
announced yet.
And
Yep.
then
you got 2311 is, as of now, under contract, Kurt Busch and Bubba.
Sure.
So then you got to look at 24. You know Kurt's probably not coming back in 24.
Well, he may not even come back next year. So
now you're left. I think the future now, oddly enough, has gone to Christopher Bell. Which, coincidentally enough, he's leading the points.
Yeah.
But
Christopher Bell.
I think he's now, oddly enough, Toyota. Is he? You can make a case. Is he Toyota's lead driver now? I mean,
not
you're not
yet.
throwing all your eggs in.
Not yet. He's getting there, but
probably next, because you're not going to throw all your eggs in Hamlin's basket because he's got 2311.
Oh yeah,
he's
next year, yes.
Yeah. Truex. Yeah, yes. This is, oddly enough, I think they quickly went from stash full of
they're powerhouses
to they're depleted. Now they're teetering, and the comparison I'll make is the Stuart Haas. They're going backwards where Stuart Haas went backwards. They've got to figure out a way to get these young guys going.
Well, yeah, but I tell you what, but because they don't have someone yet for 2024 for Truex, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's probably what I would say. I think this Brandon Jones move, the reason I keep mentioning, because Xfinity Series, our fans are like, well, what does that really have to do with much with the Cup Series? It's because you've got Corey Heim, who's won twice as a part-time driver in truck. He's a young kid. You've got Chandler Smith and John Hunter Nemechek with Kyle Busch Motorsports in the Truck Series. And Chandler and John Hunter are championship contenders still. Well, by Gibbs moving up and Jones going away, those two can move up to an Xfinity Series ride with Joe Gibbs Racing. And you've got to think they're the future of that 19 seat now.
24?
And probably for 24.
But are you sure that they're good enough for it? Do you think that
they're good?
They're Christopher
legit.
Bell talent-wise, Gibbs and Bell talent-wise.
They're a notch below. I think they're good. I think Bell, which you got to think of this with Gibbs, Bell and Gibbs, the younger Gibbs, are probably your anchors moving forward. Yes. And I would say these two are solid 3 and 4 drivers for them moving forward. Because I would say those two are probably your Truex and Hamlin replacements when those two depart.
And you think they're better off you think they're better off keeping 4?
I do.
Okay.
Because charters, you don't want to lose that charter.
Okay.
So I feel like that's probably where that move with Brandon Jones makes sense, is you bring those two up and then one of them replace, which I think Nemechek is probably more ready for 24, because remember, he was a rookie in the Cup Series last year.
Yeah.
So he already has ran a full Cup schedule. And then you groom Chandler Smith for 2 years in Xfinity. And then when Hamlin decides, I'm just going to be an owner, then that's where that goes. Okay. But saying all that, who's behind him? We always had that next young guy coming through, the Toyota pipeline. Those are your guys coming through, but what's next?
Yeah.
That's my question. What's next? What do you do next? Because you don't have KBM anymore. And there's not really that truck team. You got Thor Sport, but I don't think they're going to be that Toyota flagship. So what do you do for the next line of guys coming through? I think that's the long-term question you got to ask about Toyota, is you've always had these guys coming through. What's next?
Oh.
So
let's leave it up to the big boys to make that.
Kyle now doesn't have to worry about it. Yeah, that's where I think Kyle's weight is off, is he doesn't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
That isn't my problem, is what he's probably got to focus on. But I just struggle to think long-term now that he's not going to be with Toyota. He's truly a championship contender. Is Toyota really going to go all in with giving him everything he needs to win this championship?
We'll see on Saturday night.
Yep.
That'll be the final determination. So it should be interesting. But we might get more news next week if he's not in the playoffs, that it's all over for Kyle Busch and Toyota. Okay. And as far as this season. Okay. So the other news, and the schedule's coming out later, but one scheduling tidbit, which I was intrigued with, hearing that the All-Star race is going to North Wilkesboro.
Correct.
So
they're going to the short track.
Okay, so that, considering where they were, there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's a good call.
No, it's a great call. The thing that I wrote about that last week when that was announced, all sounds great. I like the idea. Short track, all-star race, throwback track. You cannot do these gimmicky 5 stages. This track is not built for short runs. Yeah. This track is a short track like a Darlington or Richmond where there's tire fall off. You're going to see battles, but you don't want to bunch them up because you take away the character of the track. The track is made for that 50, 70 lap run where tires are falling off and slipping and sliding and you're getting battles. That's what that track's made for. If you do this gimmicky 5-stage segments that are like 20 laps each, you kind of ruin what this racetrack does.
Yeah.
So I like it. To me, this should be your throwback race. It's a throwback track. I think it opens the door to what Fox Sports has been wanting and what we've been saying on the show. Why don't you just rotate the all-star race around? That's what other sports do. I think this opens that door because now this is a 3rd venue in 4 years. Yeah. Now you open up more tracks. NASCAR can rent the track. Hey, the NASCAR's coming to town. I would honestly do this on a track that doesn't host the points-paying race. I don't think – because you don't get a lot of data anyways because it's so gimmicky. Well, this makes it a big event. This event's going to sell out.
Oh, yeah.
You can go to an Iowa Speedway, maybe go back to a Rockingham. Go to these smaller tracks.
Sure.
I think it works. So I applaud it. But I also wrote the other day is if you go back 4 years from now, 5 years ago, and somebody told you Kyle Busch should be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing for Richard Childress, the same guy that had Kyle in a headlock in 2011 and punching him in his face, NASCAR would be going back to North Wilkesboro, and we're going to a cut race in the opening round where Harvick, Truex, and Kyle may not even be in the second round of the playoffs. What would you say? I think people are like, what? You mean the same 3 drivers that are Sharpie for the Final Four are not even going to be around in 2022 to win the championship, and you're going to go back to North Wilkesboro, and that one Kyle, and he's leaving? That shows you how much has changed.
All for the better.
And I don't anticipate this schedule release later. I think it'll be tamer. I haven't seen the schedule yet, but you got to think most of the big things have already – I mean, Chicago Street Race, we already know is coming. North Wilkesboro, we already know is coming. I think most of the events this year have been a home run.
Sure. But they got to get rid of that. What is it, Illinois?
Which
was that terrible first race that they had? What was it? The Enjoy Illinois race at Worldwide Technology Raceway.
I do know that's coming back.
Oh, come on.
It's a multi-year deal. But other than –
that's crap. Other than that, everything else was okay.
I think everything else is going to stay the same. So I don't anticipate, other than maybe a few date changes, I feel like this schedule release should be a little more tame. You're not going to see a bunch like IMS going to the road course like that was a few years ago, and Bristol going to dirt, and we're going to go to Nashville. I don't foresee any of that because a lot of that's already been announced. So I think hopefully, I don't feel like we need to change it up every year like craziness. I feel like we could use all right, we got a few new events. We know the Clash is coming back to LA Coliseum. We already know that. It's like, what more? We know Daytona will be the season opener. We know Phoenix is going to be the season finale. So I really don't foresee much craziness.
And one of the things they reminded about with why another reason I can't stand the fact that they don't have 2 races at Bristol is because the only race that they give you at Bristol is on a Saturday night during college football season.
Yep.
That means that if you or I travel to Bristol and spend the entire day there, we're pretty much zoned out from college football for the whole day.
You are, and you're asking a lot for the South is a college football hotbed. And I haven't looked this year, but is Tennessee a home game on Saturday?
No. I don't even know. They're playing some crappy team, though.
But Florida.
No, Florida's next week. They're playing home, but they're playing against like Akron or something like that.
Still, you got a Tennessee home game, and that usually sells out. I mean, you're what? Is that 100,000 plus seat stadium?
I don't know if they're that high, but yeah, it's a lot of people, sure.
And Knoxville's a big hotbed for Bristol, so you're asking a lot of fans.
But it is the only race. That's the thing, and it's it'll be interesting because most of these races have been sold out. These one-offs.
Yep.
So I would
I do think you'll
expect it
see a
should
big
have a good crowd.
Yeah, I think you will. A cut race, and I wrote about this too, so it'll come to my 5 burning questions. If the racing is tame, then we know last year was an anomaly. And what Kurt Busch told me last year about short tracks being cut races
Yeah.
probably comes true. Because, like you mentioned, you don't want to risk damage.
Well,
The
it
reason
better not be, because if it is, then you got to move it.
and that's what I'm wondering. Let's see what if this is crazy like last year, which you remember last year, if you take out the Harvick and Elliott drama, there really wasn't a whole lot of drama going on in that race. Because, like Kurt told me last year, when you get into these cut races, especially a short track, do you really want to risk, with stage points being key, we see how close these points are. Do you really want to risk damage? Do you really want to risk getting into somebody? So
there's going to be like 7 or 8 drivers that are going to say no.
Yeah, and I feel like if we see a majority of the race run that way, then yeah, you might have to have that conversation. Do you move Bristol? Because in the regular season, it's no holds bar. This is a chance to win. You're going to go for it. This time around, I think there's a lot to gain or lose, because I wrote like in a scenario of, we know Christopher Bell isn't happy with Suarez. Why would Christopher Bell make a payback here and potential create an enemy for later?
Sure.
Like, what gain does he have by doing this? He's already into the next round.
Yeah.
So there's more for him to lose. So it's like, and I wonder if some of these other guys that want to score a payback on Ross Chastain, the points are so tight, is it worth creating a rival or a payback on you and your end later in the playoffs? So we'll see. We got to let it play out in front of us, because, once you get racing, I don't think we foresaw a Chase Elliott or Kevin Harvick drama last year. The racing,
you never know who's going to.
So we'll have to see what happens. But it's a legitimate question to wonder what the racing will look like.
And before, one last thing on Indy, the season's over, the IndyCar season.
Yep.
And I posted the press. We talked about this before. I posted the press conference video, and we had a comment from SDSMT99. Thanks for posting the video. Try not to stir the pot with your hot takes. Now, I put every time I post a video, I'll throw a question to the viewers, because I want to see what they have to say. And my question, I thought, was very fair, because we've talked about this repeatedly in NASCAR. And I even asked you, we talked about this on the air a couple of weeks ago, about the IndyCar point system. Me not being a diehard IndyCar fan, I don't watch every race. I'm not like I am with NASCAR at all. I'm a novice when it comes to IndyCar. And I posed a question, as a novice guy would. Are you satisfied with the point system the way it was? Do you think Power or Newgarden? Are you basically pro Newgarden or Power based on the point system? Basically, I don't know why he thinks that I'm stirring the pot. Isn't that a normal question to ask?
It is. I don't get I honestly don't get what he meant by that, because there's not really, I would say, especially with our IndyCar stuff, and even NASCAR, because none of our stuff is really like hot takes where it's like, hey, I'm just throwing something at the wall.
Yeah.
Most of what we say is legitimate. It's not rumors. We usually don't spark rumors. We say what we hear behind the scenes, and this could happen, but they're not like we're making stuff up.
No, and I never debate or bring stuff up just to let's get into it. That's just phony. That's phony garbage that you leave up to the the morons like on ESPN and so forth. But
well, and it's a legitimate question, because you got to look at, and the drivers have talked about. So it's not like it's like illegitimate where it's not been brought up. Like, there's a reason for several years that the season finale was double points, was to kind of make it gimmicky a little bit. I mean, NASCAR is the first driver to cross the finish line in the season finale. IndyCar, if you look back on it, the Monday morning quarterback, and you look at that race, it's pretty anticlimactic. The guy that won by 30 seconds. Will Power finished third, and he easily won a championship. So it's a legitimate question, in a sense that, do we need to spice it up? Because to the common fan, I think that race would be like, what's all this cracked up to be? I mean, one guy literally won by half of a minute, and the points never really were in question all weekend. So it's legitimate. I don't know what.
Well, I mean,
he's actually
but
talking about.
again, and it's also about. I don't understand. Look, there's a lot of diehard NASCAR fans that even to this day do not like the playoff system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. If you don't like it, whatever. Okay, I get it. But we don't agree with everything the way it is. We still think there's tinkering that need to be done. We think it's a joke about the 4 drivers at Phoenix and how nobody battles them, and that has to change. And we talked about maybe putting some bonuses for drivers to entice them to want to compete and so forth. There's a lot of things they can do NASCAR to get better, but I think the system, as far as you win the race or you finish ahead of the other drivers, you are the champion. To me, in the final race, that's the way to do it. Again, if you want to be with the big boys, which NASCAR wants to be, that's how you do it. You want to playoffs, that's how you do it. But as a novice, I look at the standings in IndyCar and I see Will Power has 1 win. And I see Joseph Newgarden has 5, and he finished second in the last race of the season, and he doesn't win the championship. I'm sorry, 5 wins to 1. What are we doing here?
And it's confusing too, I think. And there's no reason way to do this because why would each series come together and make it unanimous? But I feel like there's got to be something where you could tie IndyCar and NASCAR championship battles. I'm not saying IndyCar needs to do a playoff because they clearly got 5 drivers to the final race that have mathematical odds of winning. But there's got to be a sweet spot in the middle because, like, my wife was even asking me on Sunday. They're watching the race and they're asking, well, doesn't this now championship go to Newgarden? I mean, he started 25th. He went all the way up to second. He's ahead of Will Power. I'm like, you're thinking NASCAR. It's not who crosses the finish line first. They still use points. Like Will Power, because I even say, like, it's over. They've already all pitted. It's done. I'm like, oh, no. Will Power needs to get Newgarden. I'm like, no. Will Power only has to finish in the top 10 at this point. It doesn't matter what Joseph Newgarden could win. It really doesn't matter. It's over. And I think it can confuse a NASCAR fan that I was like, I'm gonna watch the NASCAR race. Like, this IndyCar race can run from start to finish before the end of the NASCAR race. I could watch this and then tune over to that. I think it could confuse them because on NASCAR, the final race is to whoever crossed the finish line first. And my wife knows a little bit about IndyCar too, that she's even confused. And like, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, they still use points. It's about a season of points. It doesn't matter who crossed.
Yeah.
So if she's confused, others have got to be, well, what's going on here? And I'm not saying you got to make like a dictatorship where like, nope, this is the only way we do it for F1, NASCAR, and IndyCar. You don't have to do that.
They'll never agree.
But you've got to have something because most stick and ball sports are the same. I mean, you still have playoffs and you have a team beat the other team head to head in the end and win a championship. NASCAR and IndyCar are completely the opposite. I could see where it could get confusing.
Yeah, F1 and those, they're never, because they're European.
Yep.
It's not happening. But
their championship is over now.
IndyCar is an American series. So I could see IndyCar eventually needing to adopt, hopefully, a playoff. If they want the American crowd, which is what they are, shouldn't they again appease American? But like I said, there are NASCAR fans who prefer the point system.
Yep. You're not going to make everybody happy, unfortunately. And I got this with the IndyCar, and it's a big piece that I did, and I'll tinker it through the off season, even going into 2023. It's one that can always be updated. But IndyCar is in a point where they were so low with their numbers that anything was a game, what they were doing. Well, they gained and gained. So this year, it's like you're kind of hitting the ceiling here. You now need to step outside. Now you got to do something,
yeah.
Like F1's kind of on your territory and your turf now. 3 races next year. NASCAR's on the rise, but IndyCar, where there's slippery slope, and where NASCAR successfully did this, where IndyCar has got to find a way. IndyCar has a traditionalist fan base, and I'll admit I'm kind of in the middle of both. There's some things, don't mess with my tradition. Don't mess. It's like they want things run like the good old days, the 90s. I'm like, oh, so you want 2 cars on the lead lap and 9 cars finishing at the end. That won't work these days. but they want that. I want the traditional points. I want this. And it's like, well, you're the problem because you are not going to grow this fan base. And that's what I hear about NASCAR people. And it's like, you're never going to make them happy, but I want this and I want that and I don't want stages. I'm like, but they're not after you.
Yeah.
You're already watching.
Yeah.
It's the numbers. Well, I'm going to turn it off. Well, you turn it off because there's about 5 other people that are turning it on. So you're not going to appease everybody, but you've got to find a way to not piss them off where a bunch of traditionalists leave and it doesn't make up for the new people. So there's a balance here. And that's like with IndyCar. If you go to a playoff, I'm just curious because I've always said this. Their fan base is probably 400,000 to 500,000. We've talked about this on the show. That's your diehards. That's the ones that are probably watching every week.
And by the way, how many do you think that are they? What's the percentage of actual like American, like people who? Because we know NASCAR, because of the Southern roots, is American true and true. But again, IndyCar to me kind of has that F1 kind of thing to it where you'd wonder, and there's a lot of drivers that come from different parts of the world. It's not all American drivers, which are in NASCAR. So are there, how many, and every time I post videos for press conferences, especially the drivers from overseas that have this insane popularity, the numbers go up. So is there like a certain number, like a percentage of fans in IndyCar that would you say it's half that are, I'm not sure if I would say are like from not from America or are from America, but maybe they're European descent. You know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure because and that's the other thing. That's a good point is we're only seeing the TV ratings from NBC. There's a bunch of other countries that have their own TV that's airing their races that don't go into those numbers.
Yeah.
That could probably make them maybe even more than NASCAR because it's international. So that's a good question because how many of the international, and that's a good point too, is I feel like here in America, we do not do a good enough job of portraying these drivers as like gladiators and athletes.
No. Nobody knows who the drivers are in IndyCar. Nobody.
No. If I do a piece on Marcus Ericsson, oddly enough, because he'll share it, and I get so many more views in Sweden.
Yeah.
Which, granted, that's where he's from.
Sure.
Then let's just say I write a piece about Colton Herta and Marcus Ericsson. I'm going to get more views on my Marcus Ericsson than Herta from the international fan because they love him there. Yep. Here, Colton Herta is just another face.
Nobody knows who he
Marcus
is here.
Ericsson, no. Yeah, and I get it. I probably use the bad example because Marcus Ericsson is Sweden's not a big hotbed for a bunch of sports, but he's probably their Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. He's their big name guy. Yeah. We need to do a better job of elevating these drivers where people know who they are because, it doesn't move the needle. If Jimmy Johnson moves it, people, well, why is there so many stories about Jimmy Johnson? If I have Johnson's name in a headline, it just gets views. Grosjean, Ericsson. But if I have Herta, Newgarden, it just doesn't move the needle. That's the difference. And people and that's why I said the balance between traditionalists and new fans is the traditionalists just don't do enough. If they truly care, unfortunately, you got to do more. You just don't do enough. I want this race. I want to go to Milwaukee. Okay, IndyCar will go to Milwaukee. 99% of you that said you want Milwaukee back didn't go.
Yep.
Well, that wasn't a win. The IndyCar, and I noticed that with racing, there's just a lot of bitching. There's a lot of bitching and whining, and they don't do anything about it from the fan base. Where you don't get that, I feel like, in NFL or MLB or NBA. Yeah, you have your little gripes, but these fans aren't like, oh, I'm not going to go, or I'm not. It's in racing, it's just an entitlement problem, I think, with the fan base that me, but you don't actually do anything that you're wanting done. Like I've always said, and I'll put it on the fan base, if you're asking for a race to come on the schedule and you don't make it an appointment TV or going, you're the problem. Yeah. And for years, IndyCar has been saying this. You want us to go to ovals. Well, we do when you don't come. You ask for it, but you don't actually do what you ask for. So that's where it's a slippery slope. And IndyCar almost kind of has to go all in. They kind of have to put the chips in and say, all right, let's do something radical here. Let's do something. I've always said, I don't think I do stages. I don't think I do anything like, don't copy NASCAR.
No.
I think the boats on the Drive to Survive series is gone. But what I liked about the Clash is, oddly enough, do you have a halftime break? It's out of the realm. And do you bring an A-lister to come do a concert? I mean, you get 35,000 people go to a bunch of guys I've never even heard of in EDM music in a snake pit at the Speedway. Do you bring in a big name? Hey, we're going to do a halftime break. Go to the bathroom, get your drink. We'll have a concert. I mean, you still have people dancing at the Clash. That's different. That might bring different people to your race. It's just, you've got to do something different. If you just keep doing what you're doing, you've hit your limit. So that's the difference in the fan base, where NASCAR has millions of people where they could take risk and like, oh, that didn't work, we'll just move it back. IndyCar doesn't have that luxury, so they've got to be calculated, but you still have to do something.
I mean, so generally, would you say that the average IndyCar fan is pleased with the current point system, the way it's handed out? Like they're okay that Power beat Newgarden?
I'd say it's probably split from what I've seen. There's a lot of people that are like, well, he didn't necessarily deserve it. He had one win.
Okay.
How did the guy with one win win? And granted, Will Power didn't do anything wrong.
No.
He played by the system.
Exactly.
And so
it's 50-50, you think, about there?
Yeah, and I think you could the big difference I think you could change this is add more points for a win.
We've always talked about that. They should always give you more points for wins in NASCAR and in IndyCar. Absolutely.
And I think they're afraid, too, on the other side, that if you do, then maybe you have a championship clinch too soon. Let's just say, here's an example. Scott Dixon, double points, Indy 500. Pays double points. So Scott Dixon entered last weekend 20 points down, right? He was leading the Indy 500 until the final pit stop, and he was far and away gone. That was his race to win. He was several seconds up. He was speeding by 0.6 miles per hour. He was speeding. He went from first to 21st. He scored 33 points that race. What if he won? If he won, he would have had 109 points. So don't you think going to the season finale, if you give him those points, say he wins, that championship's wrapped up? There is no.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anytime, if you do that, though, see, I'm okay with the more points in NASCAR because I know we have a playoff system.
Yes.
In IndyCar, that's different. If you're going to keep the point system, then sure. That could definitely.
The only thing is, though, is that with the most points, then you still have somebody who can score the win and get the most points that finale and come back. But there's just got to be a fine line, because in the 21st century, I venture to say, fans that weren't a fan of IndyCar, or maybe a casual fan of IndyCar, I bet you the season finale did nothing for him.
I guarantee you, if IndyCar ends their season the way NASCAR does, and that's the worst case scenario because we don't like it. There has to be some tweaks to it. But you win the championship, or you finish ahead of the other guy and you win the championship, and you know that there are at least 4 drivers that can win the championship, more people will tune in. I will tune in more. So I know that for a fact. So that's how you do it. You have to make that last race mean something for more than basically potentially one guy or a second guy.
That's why they do it, because it sells sponsorship, it sells tickets, it sells TV. It keeps you engaged from February to November. Because let's be honest, F1, their champion, Max Verstappen, oddly enough, can clinch the title next race. They don't end until like Thanksgiving time. What's the point of watching all those races between now when one guy is got 11 wins? It's like, to me, that's boring. What's the point? That's what NASCAR and IndyCar don't want to have happen.
The thankful thing for NASCAR is we don't have any of those problems anymore, because they made the car better, and it's just awesome this season. The parity is amazing.
It is. I was gonna say, this year I don't think you even need a playoff, because look at the point standings.
Who knows what would go on?
It kind of took care of itself. I mean, Chase Elliott's peaked kind of early. It would kind of be an interesting ebb and flow,
maybe,
as this goes on. So,
and let's hope this continues, because that's also the other thing with IndyCar. When I look at IndyCar, and every time I turn it on, and I do. I record it, but I usually turn it on. I want to see what's going. It's the same guys again. It's always the same 10 guys in the top 10 every week, just mixed a little bit. There's no, they have yet to hit the parity that NASCAR has this season. So that's the other thing IndyCar has to do is they got to get parity in their sport. And you can't have it's not good when you have guys like Sato and talented drivers that are never in the top 5 or top 10 on a consistent basis. It's just not enough parity. You know who's going to win in IndyCar. It's a select number. And the whole thing about qualifying in IndyCar, if you qualify in IndyCar in the top 2 or 5, you're going to win the race. That's just, come on. I mean, why do I have to tune in for that? So anyway, that's IndyCar's problem. So NASCAR doesn't have that problem, and that's why we're having a great run. And Bristol is going to be the first playoff tester on Saturday night. Can't wait. And we take a look at, so again, you take a look at the playoff standings. Kyle's on the outside. Harvick's on the outside. They're two probably the best Bristol career drivers. So we know they have the ability to win in the Rin. And we go into the third playoff race, and lo and behold, we do not have yet a player that is clinched based on a win the next round. Has anybody clinched on points?
Bell's the only one.
That's it.
Just because he's so far ahead. That's it. Bell, of all people. And if you would have told me just a couple weeks ago, not a year ago, a couple weeks ago, that Christopher Bell would clinch on points in the first, be the only one. We'd have 2 non-playoff winners. That'd be Eric Jones and Bubba Wallace. Christopher Bell would clinch on points, be the only one. And that Byron and Bowman would be leading the charge for Hendrick. I would have said you're absolutely out of your chair crazy. Yeah. But here we are. That's exactly what's happening. And coming into this race, like you said, the big storyline, Kyle and Harvick are 2 of the 4 drivers out, and they each have won 60 races in their careers, and they're on the outside looking in. Harvick's got to win. Harvick's pretty much in a must-win.
Yeah, he's the only one that has to win. Even Briscoe can find a way to point his way into the next round.
Yeah, it's just wild, and that's why I wonder – this is a good situation to know how this race will work in a playoff cutoff race because so many drivers can get by on points. You got to think points racing in this race because you don't have to win. It's so close, and it's going to come down to stage points, I feel like, is what's going to get this. I mean, Kyle's only 2 points out. I mean, isn't Briscoe, 9, 8?
Briscoe's only 9 out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a stage win. It's a stage win, and you're back in.
So
compared to what other guys do. So that's where I feel like anybody can do anything. It's wide open. It is completely wide open.
Now, last week, Bubba Wallace gets the win. And by the way, he was part of your top 3.
Yep.
So
number.
You've been asking, our viewers have been asking for our top 3 each week. So now we're giving you them. And Eric had Bubba.
And I think I said, did I nail it? I had Hamlin, Bubba. I had 2. I forget who my third one was.
I don't remember.
Or no, I didn't have Hamlin. I had Bell, Wallace. I forget my third one. I remember having Bell.
Yeah, I don't remember.
He was third. I had 2.
It's too much power for me to remember.
It is.
Yeah. But I know Wallace was.
Yep.
So again, you got 2 non-playoff drivers winning, which is kind of cool. And as far as our fantasy, by the way, Toyota finished in the top 3. So
it landed what we thought. The trends we talked on the show last week with Toyota, all the trends are going that way, and they did. They dominated. I mean, if to sweep the top 3, I mean, you could throw some other guys that didn't have problems.
By the way,
I mean, even Gibbs didn't terrible.
Without all the tire issues from the first race, we did not realize what kind of race we had because there was so much issues. This was not a really good race. I mean, I was satisfied because most of my guys were in front, and I was thinking, all right, well, maybe this isn't good because we know what's going to happen. Eventually. Now, it did happen for a couple of guys like Denny Hamlin. He came from way back and finished in second and almost won the damn thing. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I've been winning this entire race with like 5 different drivers, and now Denny Hamlin's going to steal this from me. But basically, it was one of those races where whoever was like it was a lot of the same guys that were in the top 10 for most of the race. I'd say about 60 to 70%.
Yeah, it was, and it was reminiscent of a mile and a half last year. Dare I say? It just kind of seemed like
so
that.
That's not a good thing for Kansas because they got 2 races, and if the tires aren't falling off, then that means it's not going to be an exciting race.
No, and we talked about this too. I don't know if they're deserving of 2 dates.
I don't think so.
The crowd didn't look like it. I mean, just like we say, the South, especially Tennessee football, Bristol, Kansas City Chiefs football is huge in that area. And you kind of went against their game was at Arizona. Granted, it wasn't home, but it was kind of the same time slot. If you give people a choice, they're going to choose Kansas City Chiefs football over a NASCAR race, especially if you give them 2 dates, because they know, like, I can go to the one that's not against Kansas City Chiefs. So if you give them 1 date, it makes them.
And you did it at the same time. Once again, is there any reason you can't have these races earlier? I mean, come on.
It wasn't ideal to have it at the same. You have an IndyCar championship and Kansas City Chiefs football at the same time as your NASCAR. Yeah. What do you expect? Yeah. So,
and the race wasn't all that great anyway. So
no, that's another track. I feel like just give them 1 race. Texas only needs 1 race. Let's just get 1 race, because I feel like it'll fill the stands back in.
Now, your fantasy team, actually, even though you didn't win, you caught up 160 points on CJ, and that puts you into 2nd place. But look, we said it last week, and I was getting nervous early when both Harvick and Reddick went out. I was like, "Oh, this is my week.
Yeah,
I'm gonna lose like 400 points in 1 week." But all my other drivers did well, with the exception of Reddick and Harvick. And those are the only 2 drivers who really had issues, right?
Yeah, nobody else really had many issues. And yeah, my team last week did exactly what I, granted, it's the 2nd playoff race, not the 1st, but I built it for the playoffs, was just that moment. They don't have to win, but I got playoff guys that'll just get top 15s. And that's what you need to get points in our league. And that's exactly what ended up happening, because, a couple playoff drivers would take themselves out, but that's why I built my team full of playoff guys. Minus, I know I got a couple. I dropped 1. But it's for this reason, is I don't have to get the overall win. I had a willpower type day. I don't win, but I scored a lot of points. Yeah. So this is what I built that. Just like baseball, you see teams that kind of hang around, they'll make the playoffs, and then you all of a sudden you see in the playoffs, like, where'd that team come from? Well, they're a playoff team. They got pitching set up, and my team was built this year. I've learned from our past 2 years. I need a playoff team. I got a playoff team. Granted, it's 1 race. Things can change again, but they stood out from the playoffs for me last week.
And again, we have double points for 1 more race, and then we go to doubling the points from the first 3 races. So we go from 200 points for the winner to 400 points for the winner in the next 3 races after Bristol. So things can change quite a bit. We'll see how it goes. Right now, my lead on you is about 450, 60 points, something like that. All right. Now, Bristol, thank goodness. Finally, we're here. 15 of the last 20 winners started in the top 10. 12 of the last 20 in the top 5 with 5 pole sitters. Chevy and Dover is the most similar, right? Because of the concrete surface?
Concrete, high banks. Okay. Yeah, I'd look at Dover.
So Chevy actually finished top 3 at Dover this year. So that's something that could come into play. But Kyle Busch led a best 103 laps at Dover, and Denny Hamlin led 67. So they didn't finish in the top 3, but they were at the top early on. Ford did not have a driver in the top 7 at Dover. So that could come into play. As far as our picks, we've had a lot of picks lately. So this week we only have 2.
Ooh,
2 similar picks. That's it.
I'm gonna say
one top contender and 1 long shot.
Kyle?
No, I was the only one that stayed away from Kyle.
Bell?
Yes. Bell's the top contender.
And then the long shot,
I think.
Is it one of the 100 to 1 guys?
No.
that I thought they stashed
We have
a bunch
two. We
of dudes
have
100
two.
to 1.
We both put money on Busher and Stenhouse.
Yeah, I figured why
But
not for 100 to 1.
CJ did not put any money on any long shot except this one.
Trying to think of other long Bowman.
Yes.
Maybe. Okay.
So Bowman at 30 to 1, Bell at 10 to 1. You are starting to learn your lesson a little bit because you've gone away from the favorites this week, except for Kyle. And I'm assuming that's just a gut thing. Coming because look, I know Kyle is where he is and all that kind of stuff, but it is Bristol. He just kind of signed his deal. So we'll see. But again, at 7 to 1, I'd rather have at 12 to 1, I consider Kyle, but I just can't do Kyle again at 7 to 1. He's the second choice.
The only reason I did was because if you look at his stats this year, especially coming in this weekend, they're still not. 30th and 26th are his 2 playoff finishes. He's been outside the top. I think he still only has like 1 top 5 since June.
No top 5s in the last 13 races.
Okay, so it was the one in Gateway, and that was June 5th. So no top 5 since June 5th. 30th and 26th last 2. The only reason he won the dirt race was because Reddick, coincidentally enough, and Briscoe took each other out, and he won only the straightaway.
Hey, thanks, guys.
But he's just so good there. That's the only reason. And now that his future, I'm like, well, kind of talked about Truex kicked into gear with his future solidified. We'll see how much that has a hand in this. And I thought 7 to 1 was still a bargain compared to what you used to get Kyle Busch at Bristol for. So it was between him or Hamlin, and Hamlin kept saying all year, and even recently, short tracks are not Toyota's forte, and that he just does not expect to be good there. Well, between him and Kyle, I'm like, Kyle's won 8 times there. I'm going to go with the 8-time winner over the guy that said he's going to struggle. So that's the only difference.
Well, Kyle did not have a top 5 in any of the between Martinsville, Richmond, the 2 short tracks, and Dover. So no top 5s, but all top 10s. Hamlin won Richmond and finished 4th at Richmond, the other race. Did not have a good finish at Dover, but like I said, did lead 67 laps. So, yeah, we understand. I completely understand why both of these guys are where they are. And look, Kyle's led almost 2,600 laps here, which is amazing. And he's got 6 top 5s in his last 8 with a runner-up and 3 wins. I just can't do it. Not at 7 to 1. I'd rather move some of that money back. But at least that was the only favorite that you invested in. CJ's still going with the favorites. He still invested all his money on the favorites, so we'll see if it works for CJ. But yeah, you've been with him for a few weeks, but I don't think I bet like a top 3 or 4 favorite in a top 3 favorite in about 6 weeks, 5 weeks.
It's especially with what we're seeing. I mean, you just look at the last few winners: Austin Dillon, Eric Jones, Bubba Wallace.
Yeah,
and this is the crunch time of the year. This is the regular season finale, and then your first 2 playoff races. And you can even go back. Kyle Larson, Watkins Glen was only a 2nd win of the year, and then you go between that, Harvick won the 2. Those are his first 2 wins of the year, and then before that, Tyler Reddick, only his 2nd win of the year. So that's the reason I kind of started going away. I'm like, the favorites aren't winning. No. They're just not getting it done.
And they tie you up with all that money.
They do. And with Bristol, it's like, I feel like this track, even though Hamlin's saying that, which I went against with what he said, but it's a short track. How much is speed really a factor on a short track? You're not really getting fully up to speed. So I don't feel like aerodynamics in short track, you're going to get people running each other out of the way.
And I wonder if he's going to be one of those drivers that doesn't really want to get into any trouble.
I feel like he is, and he's so good on points. I feel like this is a race. Just get a couple stage finishes, get you some points, and move on. Don't ruffle any feathers. You're in with like a crazy. I think he's like 20th or better, something crazy. Like you don't have to do anything.
So how do you?
Even without any stage
what
points.
Gets transferred over to the next round?
Playoff points.
Playoff points.
You get to carry him with you.
Okay.
So like, let's say Chase Elliott gets in by 1 point. Let's say he's the 12th out of 12 to go by. He'll be the points leader again next round because he has those 40 playoff points that transfer over. So that's why for him, those were so big because it doesn't matter what he does. I mean, it matters, in the 3 races for each round, but he's always going to have those playoff
And those
points.
playoff points again
to go to
come
the next
from
round. Stage wins get you 1, and a race win gets you 5. And then the end of the regular season, the top 10 in regular season points got playoff points. So since Chase Elliott won the regular season
he got
championship,
10 more points.
he got
15 points. Okay. All right.
So that's equivalent to 3 race wins. So that's why for him, and I still think he only has to finish like 28th or better, even as bad as he's been this round. He only has to finish 28th or better. You got to think he can do that. So that's why I look at it's he could squeak by.
Look, we saw what happened with Harvick and Reddick last week, and Harvick for 2 weeks. It would not surprise us if at least one driver early on encounters some sort of issue that you think, he's going to be okay, and he's got to sweat it out.
It always happens. It always happens. It'll happen to one of these playoff guys above the cut line. Something's going to happen to where, but because of last year we talked about, I don't know if it's worth starting a fire with somebody this week. No, because you look at Elliott and Harvick, it almost cost Elliott last year. Harvick wrecked him on the Roval. It just happened to Elliott use the damage enough just to get by to the next round. So I just don't know. I just don't know if Bristol this week, if it's really, unless somebody runs you wrong during the race, I don't think it's that anybody's playing right now to go out and make payback. This is the week I'm cashing in my payback. I just don't know if it's worth it. I really don't. So that's why I feel like some of these guys that just need some points to get by. Hamlin, Larson. That's why I faded. They're not great on short tracks this year. They don't need to win. So maybe they just stay out of the way.
Yeah. So Larson, who's also 7-1, and he's the defending champ. He led 175 laps last year. He has 6 top 10s in his last 7, 2 runner-ups and a win. He led 175 laps or more 3 times in his last 7. So he's good here. But again, if you just take a look at Larson overall, he does have a win over his he has actually 1 top 5 over his last 7 races, and that was a win. So he's still not really anywhere near the driver he was last year. He's not that dominant, but he's there. He's like, you're wondering still each week, how good can he be? Because even when they encounter problems, they still always find a way to end up in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, he's 12th and 8th in the playoffs, just kind of meh. He's there. Short tracks too. 4 of the last 5 finishes on him this year were 12th or worse. He's better on the intermediate package than the short track package this season. So I thought for 8-1, not worth my money this week.
Oh.
Great, go out and dominate and win. But for 8-1 with what he's doing, because I think this year has shown there's not much from the years past that is going to translate. We've seen a lot of crazy stuff happen this year. So for 8-1 with that,
it's actually 7-1 now.
Or 7-1.
Larson and Kyle are 7. And look, his best 2 races this year on those tracks, again, Dover, Richmond, Martinsville, was 5th at Richmond once. That's it. It doesn't have anything else going on.
You're just looking at a top 10 out of him. But for 7-1 for a win, not really worth it.
Now, out of the top drivers that were under 10-1, you bet Kyle, I bet Elliott. So Elliott has never won at this track. I think he's overdue. He's got the win at Dover. He won both stages at Martinsville. Didn't win. 5th at Richmond. And he's led 423 laps in his last 6 races at Bristol. That's 70 laps a race. So, yeah, I think he's a little overdue here. Whether it happens now or not, who knows? But, look, it is going to be interesting for those drivers in the spot Elliott's in is, do I want to just – I want to win to get in, to just – no doubt. I'm going to win to get in.
Yep.
Or – and maybe a lot of it's going to depend on what we see early with those stage points, and maybe we start seeing strategies early. But I think Elliott's one of those guys who, if he's got a fast enough car, might just decide, hey, maybe I should win. I've never won here before.
Yeah, it's a big race everybody wants to win. It's the Bristol Night Race. Plus, again, you get 5 playoff points for winning that you get to carry on with you. So he's due. I feel like he's one of the top drivers to put on because we talked about you can kind of take Hamlin out of the equation. You can take Larson out of the equation. Kyle really hasn't done much to merit his odds. Elliott's kind of the top guy left.
And you're getting a
So
little bit
he's a
better
solid
odds,
play.
which is why I did it. He's
You are.
8-1.
Yeah.
So
you're getting the regular season champion, right? For 8-1. It's at a track that he should be good at. So that's why. Not a bad
Now
play.
we all did again, Bell. You and I did Hardovic also, who's 10-1. Not surprised. What is Martin Truex Jr. doing at 10-1?
That baffled me. That's like, I mean, he's got 2 top 10s in his last 18 at Bristol. He's been 20th and worse for 13 of his last 16 there. He's not a playoff driver. I'm like,
he has 2 top 5s in his career at Bristol.
Yeah, he's 10-1. That made zero sense.
He was on the pole last year and led 5 laps.
And remember last year, I don't think we qualified. And the only reason he was on the pole was because he was leading the points.
Yeah. so he couldn't even take advantage of that. There's no way he should be 10-1.
No. Not even
That's
close.
Why we didn't pick him.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Nope.
But Bell
not touching him.
Is definitely the driver who can go either way, but most likely, hey, man, I want to win again. Why not? I'm taking chances. I'm bumping people. I'm already into the next round anyway.
He's got nothing to lose, and him and Hamlin are the only 2 that have a top 5 finish in both playoff races this year. And he was good in the Xfinity Series there. He doesn't have great stats in the Cup Series. He's got like 1 top 10, but you got to think he was also with Levine Family Racing for a couple of those. So 9-1 I felt was a little small for him because again it's 10-1. I know we talked about last week. You're going off names or 10-1, but it's still 10-1 for a guy that's probably the hottest driver in the series right now. And the trend say he's going to win. 5 minus 2 is 3. Those are his 2 finishes. 3 minus 2 is 1. So,
okay. 5 top 10s in his last 9. Excuse me, 5 top 5s in his last 9. With a runner-up and a win. And you mentioned what he's done in the playoffs. Now, he doesn't have a great history here NASCAR Cup-wise in 3 races, but the last 2 races were really bad, and I'm assuming he had damage. Because he does have a win.
And Levine Family Racing wasn't a great team when he started off with there. You got to think that too. Like and they weren't qualifying. He was just starting in the back. So he hasn't had a really chance to qualify and show what he can do here in a Cup car. So I expect him to qualify well.
Well, he's got a win and a runner-up in 4 Xfinity Series races. And he finished 4th at Dover and 2nd and 6th at Richmond. So
definitely
makes a lot of sense. Harvick, again, you and I put money on Harvick. Surprised that CJ didn't put any money on Harvick. But hey, you know what? He could probably go out in the first 10 laps and it's over and it's done and his season's over. But we know what he's done already this season when the chips were down. We know how good he is here. And he's got 14 top 5s and 3 wins in 41 races. And let's also keep in mind, he was 1st and 2nd at Richmond, 9th at Dover, 2nd in this race last year, by the way. And he won the night race, the last night race in 2020. Actually, the 2020 night race. He won that one, leading 226 laps. So,
yeah, I mean, you look at Richmond, granted, you can't take a lot from there, but 1st and 2nd. Here, the last 2 times out, 1st and 2nd. His back's against the wall. 4 top 6 finishes on short tracks this season in general. And you're getting him for those odds. It's like he's got to win. And this is a track that I think, other than Phoenix, if you put it like, hey, what track do you want to go to that you have to win at in the playoffs? Well, if I can't have Phoenix or Darlington, give me Bristol. This is a good track for him. So I thought those are pretty good odds for a driver that has to win. Yeah.
There you go.
That's why I went his way.
Now, the other drivers at 12-1, Byron and Chastain, you put money on both of them. I just put money on Byron. Byron, even though he doesn't have a great history at the track, it's been lately. He's got 2 top 10s and 1 top 5 at his last 3. He has never led a lap, but keep in mind, he won Martinsville this year, dominated Martinsville. Yep. He had only led 9 laps ever at Martinsville prior to dominating this year. So completely different driver, getting used to the short tracks, that kind of deal. 3rd in this race last year, and we know what kind of start he's gotten off to. So yeah, 12-1, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm back on the Byron Bowman bandwagon. I was off of it for weeks, months, which were right. Now it's like, okay, 3rd last year, won Martinsville. He got some momentum. why not for his odds? So, yeah, that's why I went his direction,
Yeah,
too.
and Bowman, speaking of Bowman, so he's 30-1. He was 5th in this race last year. He was 5th at Dover. And he does have 3 top 10s and 2 top 5s in 11 races at this racetrack, including the 5th last year. So, yeah, look, this is exactly the type of race you could see Bowman winning. Doesn't have a lot. He has a couple of different. He's been okay here a couple of times, but this is what we were talking about mid-season when I said anytime Bowman's the long shot, I'm taking him. Then he got so bad that you just okay. But now he's back to that point where okay, you're going to give me 30-1 on Bowman, I'm putting money on him.
It just goes to show you of how much Vegas just does not think Bowman, because you got to think Bowman and Byron, I look at them kind of one and the same. Bowman was 5th last year. Byron was 3rd. Not much difference. This playoffs, because we're going to talk about playoffs now, because the regular season, not much was different than them. Playoffs, Byron was 8th. Bowman was 10th. Last week, Byron was 6th. Bowman was 4th. Bowman led, 107 laps last week? He led the most laps. Look at the odds difference.
12-30.
It's like, yeah.
I actually look at Truex.
Bowman's a huge play.
And I'm saying Truex should be 30-1 and Bowman should be like, 16-1 or something like that.
It should. I feel like Bowman is almost free money at this point because you don't have to risk a whole lot to win more. And it's like, yeah, he was quadruple almost the odd. Like,
well, he's your top guy.
Go that direction.
You put $20 on him for $600.
Yeah, that's why. I mean,
he could change your season for those if he wins this week.
He could. And like you said, this is let's look at the season, how it shaped up too. And I got the stat right here because I finally transferred back over this new computer. 8 of the last 9 races in the final stage, the race overall, the winner did not lead the lap until the final stage. That's 8 of the last 9 races, 6 straight. Doesn't that have Bowman written all over him? Yeah. He doesn't win until he leads in the final.
That's why when he was leading laps last week, that was the kiss of death.
You knew he wasn't going to win. Yeah. I feel like this has Bowman written all over him. A win where nobody would see it coming, and you get him for 30-1. It's just, it's almost disrespectful that he's 30-1. And I think now we know, because there was that rumor that Kyle could take his ride. That's not happening. Bowman's set. He's going to be back in 2023. So I feel like everything's lining up for him to succeed this weekend.
Chastain is also 12-1. You took Chastain. 3rd at Dover, led 86 laps. 5th at Martinsville. Never had a top 10 in 5 races at Cup, but again, this year, it doesn't mean anything. 14th last year, just like I said. 7th last week, which is his first top 10 in his last 8 races, and we said that last week. Got to wait for him to get back into the top 10 before we even consider taking him. 1 top 5 in 11 Xfinity Series races, but it was a runner-up. He led 117 laps, and it was his last Xfinity Series race in 2020.
And he's an interesting guy because you look at his past stats; they're all with like underfunded teams. He hasn't really raced. That Bristol race was with the Ganassi car. So you put him in a good car, he does well. And on short tracks this year, he's got 5 top 8s. He was 2nd in Phoenix. So he's good on short tracks. My only fear with him is just somebody take him out.
Yeah, sure.
He's got a Chevy car. We know Chevy could do good there. Chevy did good at Dover.
Well, who could take him out? Which non-playoff driver?
I don't know if there's Truex. Truex kind of was from Dover. You remember that, right? And the Dover.
He would be the top guy.
I don't think
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think Hamlin or Elliott mess with him this week. I don't really think it's worth the war.
But keep an eye if Truex gets close to Chastain.
If he gets that payback. Because, Truex has nothing to lose. He can help a Toyota driver out. And
he stinks at Bristol.
Yeah. I just don't know if there's anybody else that's not in the playoffs that really are going to this is my moment. I'm taking him out right now. So, which is the case.
You can still wait to Talladega.
Yeah. No. And the other thing, too, with him is we know he's aggressive. He would be a guy that would rough somebody up to go for the win. He's aggressive. He'll take it. So that's what you kind of need to win. And with some guys maybe being tentative, like, I don't really want to start a war with anybody, Chastain will. So for those odds, why not?
15-1, you had Reddick, Logano, and Blaney I took Blaney and Reddick. CJ took Logano and Reddick. You took Blaney and Logano. So we all had a different take
All different.
on the three. Yeah. Blaney, 5 top 10s, 2 top 5s, and 12 races, but he's better than that. Led 484 career laps in his last 7. That's 69 a race. He was 7th and 10th at Richmond, 4th at Martinsville. He won the second stage at Dover. I'm not sure what happened to him, why he finished 26th at Dover. I don't remember.
That's a pit stop. I think that was the pit stop issue.
But he did win the second stage, so something must have happened in the last stage of why he didn't result well. 4th in this race last year with leading 45 laps, and he's got 3 top 5s and a runner-up and win in 5 Xfinity Series races. So at 15-1, I think is a bargain at Bristol. Logano has 8 top 10s in his last 14 with 5 top 5s and 2 wins. He hasn't been all that great on these types of races, but he was 2nd at Martinsville. Last year, 11th. His last 4, 11, 11, 21, 16. So that's nothing. Reddick, meanwhile, 3 cup races. He crashed in 1, 12th and 4th in the other, and he was 11th or better in all 5 Xfinity Series races, including a runner-up and a win in his last 2. The only thing is, and if you take a look at how things are going lately, before last week, 7th, 2nd, 3rd, looked good until car problems. So Reddick is going pretty good right now, but he was the one driver you stayed away from in that group.
Yeah, I just like the Penske's. I feel they were kind of undervalued, like you said this week. I mean, Blaney, out of his last 7, he's led over 100 laps in 3 of them. If you remember right, a lot of times he was taking on wrecks because he was leading the race and back markers were crashing and he had nowhere to go. And he was 4th 3 times on short tracks this season too. So I'm like, that's good odds for 15-1. Logano seems to be heating up still. He's won this race multiple times. 7 top 10s his last 12. He had a top 2 going 2020, the spring race. Him and Elliott had their run in. 4 top 8s on short tracks this season. 5 top 6s in the last 7.
Yeah, he also had problems at Dover.
6 in the last 7. Yeah,
I'm not sure why.
So I think they could learn from that. So I thought for 15-1 for those two, it seems like when you keep doubting those guys, they end up prevailing. So this seems like a race those two can capitalize as well.
Wallace, no way he's going to win back-to-back races, so we all skipped him at 25-1. And you know what, Bubba, we could do without the, post-race. And nobody, I mean, he was trying to give it to people who didn't believe in him or something, or I don't know. I just get a feeling I know who he was talking about, what group of people. But you don't need that, because there are people who are rooting for you, so just, you don't need to say that. Suarez 40-1. Nobody took him. Almirola, Briscoe, Cindric, Dillon, and Gibbs, all 50-1. And out of that group, I was the only one that took Briscoe and Dillon. I put a couple of bucks on those guys. Dillon 13th last year, 13th at Dover. Last 4 Xfinity Series races at Bristol. 1st, 2nd, and 4th. So he likes Bristol. Cindric is also in this group. Nobody touched. Dillon, 3rd at Martinsville. 5 top 10s, 4 top 5s, and a win in 9 Xfinity Series races. So I figured, you know what? Maybe I'll put a little money on Dillon. Maybe he's got the same mojo as Harvick.
Yeah, Dillon would be the one out of that group just because playoff driver, Reddick's teammate. I just don't see a rookie Cindric kind of jumping in and winning this race. He's not really had the best of finishes lately either, 16th to 12th in the playoffs. He's still there in points. He needs to focus on that. Dillon, yes, same situation on points, but I feel like he knows on speed he's not going to beat these guys that get a win and you move on anyway. So, I think Dillon for those stats, I definitely side.
And then the 100-1 drivers, as I mentioned before, we both took Buescher and Stenhouse. So Buescher 8th at Dover, 3rd at Richmond. He does have a couple of top 10s at Bristol. Stenhouse, I think he's the best one because he's got 6 top 10s, 4 top 5s, 2 runner-ups at Bristol. He was 2nd at Dover this year. But he's averaged 30th in his last 6 races at Bristol. I'm willing to forgive that because it's a new car and you're getting 100-1.
Yeah, 100-1 for him. For the he's a steal. I mean, he knows how to run Bristol. So the Dover thing solidified it for me. Both of them are good, and even Keselowski too, and those similar odds.
Yeah, you took
Three top
Keselowski and
sixes.
Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got 3 top 6s in his last 4 Bristol starts, and it seems like RFK is starting to turn things around. And Jones, he's been phenomenal. If you look at the average finishing positions among active drivers at Bristol, he's number 1.
If he hadn't
just won the Southern 500
2 weeks ago, I would have put more money on Jones. I would have thought he's going to win this week. Yeah.
I think it'd be – I don't see him winning 2 races.
That's hard.
2 of the 3.
Yeah.
But this has also been a weird season.
Sure has.
And I got to think out of the non-playoff drivers, the 17th on, he'd be the top one that could win this.
Could be.
And I think it'd be telling if Eric Jones wins the Southern 500 and the Bristol Night Race in the same season, and he doesn't even move on to the championship. So that's an interesting one. That's why you're getting good odds for him.
Yeah, he's worth definitely a buck out there. If you're putting money on guys this week, just put a buck on him. Him and Stenhouse. Yeah, because Jones led 260 laps in the 2017 night race and finished second on the pole. So that was a dominant day.
I think he was top 10 or right around the top 10 last year.
8th.
The same petty car?
8th.
There you go.
So
now he's seems to be better.
Yeah,
so.
That's the only thing is can he win 2 out of 3? That's the tricky one.
That's going to be tough.
So next week is Texas. So it's the only time we go to Texas this year, this particular Texas. So what's up with this Texas race? How was it? How do you think it's going to be with the new car?
I don't think it can get worse.
What is it?
It's been
similar to? I'll say Kansas.
Probably Charlotte.
Okay.
More close. But what makes this different is they reconfigured it a few years ago. The turns are different. It's a hybrid of all the 1.5 miles, but it just because of turn 1 being so wide in the PJ1, and then turn 3 and 4 being so narrow with the PJ1 and that angle, even if they don't spray it, stained it. It just makes it slick. It's not an ideal track. So I don't think we're going to see anything crazy come out of there.
So you think it's going to be like Kansas? You mean?
I think it'll be worse. Kansas. I think my expectations of this Texas race will be the worst of the season.
Wow. Okay.
That's how I do not have any stock. Texas, they keep talking about blowing it up and starting over. It's time. I don't think this race will do a whole lot.
So that's right. That was the All-Star race.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Not good there. All right. So give me your top 3. Bell.
Harvick.
Okay.
And
got to win.
Bell, Harvick. I'm going to say Harvick will win. If I did, I would say Harvick 1, Bell 2, and let's go with an outside. That's what I'm trying to think. Jones. Oh, Bowman. Yeah. Bowman. Okay. Those are the 3.
All right, there you go. I don't. I would go with Bell and Harvick, and you know what? I might just go with Byron. Might do that. All right, that'll wrap it up. Unfortunately, Texas next week, so it is what it is.
Yes.
But we'll have hopefully a lot to talk about with Bristol and the playoffs and the drivers, and we'll take a look at our picks, and we'll have to maybe make new predictions and all that other stuff. So that's coming up next week. Eric, appreciate it, and enjoy the race on Saturday night.
Thank you. I sure will.